Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mona, and I am the Communications Coordinator for the Mississauga Business Enterprise Center. So today's webinar is how to sell on price, not value. And today's session is brought to you by the City of Mississauga's MBEC. MBEC is part of the City of Mississauga's Economic Development Office. We are the central source of information guidance for the small business owners and entrepreneurs. Okay, so a bit more about MBEC. We are your central resource for small business information, resources, and guidance. We are currently providing our support and services remotely, and our hours are from Monday to Friday from 9 to 5. Feel free to reach out to us for any of your small business concerns when it comes to any free business information and guidance, webinars and workshops, resources and tools, training and mentorship programs, and entrepreneurship programs. And here are the ways to contact us and a few resources. So you can always just email us at mbec@mississauga.ca. You can call us at 905-615-4460. And then there's also our website, which is mississauga.ca/MBEC. And feel free to connect with us through any of our social media platforms as well for small business support and resources. So a bit about our speaker today, Caitlin Blundell. As a certified business coach, Caitlin helps business owners build a more profitable and enjoyable business. So one that works for them, not just because of them. She helps her clients achieve more using proven tools, methodologies, and systems that have been tested and perfected over tens of thousands of businesses worldwide. So as a coach, she holds her clients accountable, and just like a sports coach, she pushes them to perform at optimal levels. So all of Caitlin's contact information will also be provided, and here is her website. Okay, so I'm just going to hand it off to Caitlin.
Perfect, thank you, and thank you for that introduction. So welcome everybody. As Mona said, I'm Caitlin Blundell. I am a certified business coach, and not just that, I'm an action coach, which is the world's kind of first, biggest, and original coaching franchise. So as an action coach, my real objective is to support the business owners in the community. So I'm really excited to be here with the City of Mississauga's Business Entrepreneur Center and to invest the next hour or so talking about some different sales and marketing ideas that you can use to make sure that the conversations that you're having with your customers and your prospects are all about the value that you offer them, not negotiating for a lower price. And I said, we're going to invest time together. And that's deliberate. I say that because a mentor once told me that you can either spend your time or you can invest it. So I do want to recognize that you've also made a choice to invest your time today. And I know that you did that for a reason. So my plan is this: I'm going to present a bunch of information over the next hour and a bit. And I'm also going to make myself available after this for anyone who's serious about building their business and wants to talk through any of this in any more depth. But in the meantime, if you do have a specific question or something some burning question or something you'd like me to address today, a key outcome you'd like to get out of today, please do go ahead and put that in the chat. We're gonna moderate the chat fairly actively, so feel free to put those questions in there, put those comments in there, and we'll address them as we go with the presentation. So I'm going to just share my slides here, but before we dive into the presentation, I do want to make sure that I have your permission to be your coach for the next, hour and a half. And assuming that I have it, as your coach, I have one rule for today and 3 goals as well. So my rule first, okay, because I truly do believe that being in business should give you more life and not suck the life out of you. So my rule is always that we're going to have fun. Okay, and sometimes that's not what people expect from a business seminar. But for me, when I started my business, one of my guiding principles was that I wanted it to be fun. And so I made it a rule. So there's no exceptions. Next, here are my goals. Okay, first, I really want to educate you. I want to provide information and tools that will help you build a really amazing business. I'm not here to motivate you. Okay, I always say motivation alone is kind of pointless because after all, if you motivate an idiot, they just do dumb stuff faster. So what I really want to do is educate and really make this your training ground. My second goal for today is that I do want to coach you. That's what I love to do. So again, if you have questions, please do go ahead, fire away in the chat. And I'm going to pause here and there and we'll answer them. And of course, if your business is already really healthy, maybe you can't wait to run a couple of laps with me, right? And if that's not the case, if that idea makes you a little bit uncomfortable, that's fine too. Okay, so no matter where you are today, there should be something that you can take away here to improve your business. My third goal is that I do want you to walk out with ideas that you can use right away. I am an action coach. I am not a think about it coach. So the goal is action and implementation and execution. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to start out by going through a couple of the kind of founding principles that I use in my coaching, just so that we're all on the same page. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to get your marketing working really hard for you so that you're attracting the right prospects. And then I'm going to cover a little bit about the actual sales process at the end and how to seal the deal. And let's start there in the chat. If you could let me know on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you as a salesperson for your company? If 1 is that, you dread it, you hate it, and 10 is that, you're a natural born salesperson, where do you fall? If everybody who's kind of in participant mode could put in the chat between 1 and 10. Right, we've got a 7. That's great. 6 and 7. Okay. 9, excellent. Okay, so I'm seeing we've got some people who are really quite comfortable with the sales process. Is there anybody who's maybe a little less comfortable in those situations? Or are we all feeling pretty good about sales at the moment? 5, perfect. Okay, great. That's useful for me to know, and perfect. So there is a bit of a range. Great. So as we get to that sales portion, I think a big part of the battle is becoming comfortable with that identity as a salesperson, and that's certainly something we can talk about a little bit, and maybe even get some input from the people who are up there at an 8, 9, 10 level about what worked for them to get there. So I always start out by saying that the only way that you can truly fail with sales, with marketing, and with business is by failing to participate. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. Okay, it's not about win or lose, it's about winning and learning, because every time you do something and it doesn't get you the result that you want, there's always something to learn from it. And when you learn the lesson, you only really need to learn it once, because then you can adapt. So as with a lot of things, in business and in life, you get out what you put in. So when you are in your own business, implementing the tips and strategies from today, what I want you to do most of all is measure the results and really pay attention to what's working for you and what doesn't work for you. Because if you put in 100% in terms of effort and 100% as you measure the results and adopt any new learnings, then of course you will get 100% out of it. And, I'm sure we have all made mistakes in business. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of us are experts at making mistakes. And the experts will tell us that it's the recovery and the course correction that are much more important. But being too timid or too intimidated to take on critical roles in your company because of that kind of fear of failure, that's what really holds us back. So the best path forward is to, of course, do the work to prepare, but then be prepared to make decisions quickly, own the consequences of the decisions, and really own the learning that comes out of them as well. Now, there are a couple of words that I don't allow in my coaching sessions, as well as in these webinars and workshops. And I know you can't, we're not having a two-way conversation right now, but I also want you to be aware of some of the things that happen internally, as we speak to ourselves. So I don't allow the words "I know," and that's because in order for you to get the most out of this, you have to be willing to learn new things. And if you're in business, I'm sure that you already have some experiences to draw on. And I know you've probably watched things, read things, and tried things. And some of the, there's going to overlap with the material that we're going to cover today. But these words, I know, it really shuts down any new learning. When you have this I know mentality, you're not open to any further tweaks and nuances. I like to think of it this way. Have you ever seen a movie twice? Okay, I'm sure you have. And I'm sure you saw something new the second time you watched that you didn't see the first time. And you might even have a movie that you've watched, 10 or more times in your life, and you might still see new things every time. And that's really what learning is all about, right? Not necessarily teaching you something you've absolutely never heard before. It's about the nuances and the tweaks and the little aha moments and something you already knew alongside something else that you already knew. And you have this like blinding flash of the obvious that puts you on a new path. And it can't happen unless you're willing to learn new things. So sometimes, if you have teenagers, you've probably heard, I know. So as grown-ups, it can sound a little bit different. We're a little bit less obnoxious most of the time. So maybe it sounds like, well, I've tried that. It doesn't work. That doesn't work in my industry. Okay. Well, maybe it will and maybe it won't, right? Maybe you weren't consistent. Maybe you didn't implement it very well. Maybe there's a tweak we can make. But there's absolutely an open and honest discussion that we can have about it. So when you find yourself tempted by I know, I'm going to ask you to replace it with this. Isn't that interesting? Okay. And that reaction will open up that different level of learning where, you might get that tweak or that idea that can make all the difference in the world. And this is also where we can start to have the fun, because even though your business is, of course, a serious part of your life, it's okay to loosen up a little bit, right? It's okay to laugh. It's great to take a day off, to take time to rest and to reset. So it doesn't have to be like a constant grind. And by sticking with isn't that interesting, then we are open to those BFOs, right? The blinding flashes of the obvious, those little bits of clarity that can suddenly hit us, right? Where we can take what we're already doing and open up a new avenue for growth. So all of that is why I like to start here with what is a business? Because I found that a lot of people really understand this wrong. Okay, a lot of people think that it's really about creating a job for yourself. But it's definitely not just about being busy and filling your time from 9 to 5, right? We don't spell business with a Y. So in my definition, it's about creating a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without you. Because if you've got to be there every day, it's no longer a business, it's a job. And this is often the reason business owners work so hard is because their business doesn't. So then what happens when you want to take 4 weeks of vacation? So how can we set your business up so that it allows you to do that? You certainly don't want to end up trapped or stuck in your business. Like some people I speak to, I was talking to somebody who said, I work harder than my employees and I take home less money, right? That's not what we want. We want to get the business to work so that you don't have to. In order to get there, I coach 6 steps. And I'm going to give you a really quick overview of all 6 steps today. And then we're really going to focus in on that sales and marketing piece. But I wanted to show you first how this fits into like the overall picture. So we start at the first step at mastery. This is really the fundamentals. And you've got this level dialed in when you're not running around and putting up fires. The goal is to eliminate any chaos in the business. So if you've ever felt like your business is running you rather than the other way around, there are some strategies that we can put in place to like get you out of that reactive mode. Once we've got that stability from mastery, then it's all about cash flow. And this is something that a lot of businesses struggle with. Either they're not making enough money to grow at the rate they want to, or the cash flow is really unpredictable. Okay. So when we're ready, we go up to stage 3, leverage. And the definition here is doing more with less, which makes sense, right? The business is growing. So how can we now build in some efficiencies and buy back your time? So we need systems, okay? And once the systems are in place, then we can start structuring the team for future growth. And this isn't just about going out and hiring some people. It's about recruiting the right people to grow the business. Because ultimately, if you are running the business forever, it's still just a job. So maybe we put a GM in charge. And that allows you to focus on the growth side instead of the day-to-day. And then this next level of synergy, this is why you need the GM, because it's at this point that you can start multiplying your success. Maybe that's by moving into a new territory. Maybe it's a new market. Maybe it's even, franchising the company. Because after all, if it's working perfectly in one location, what's to stop it succeeding in another? And finally, the results, okay? And this is now a different game. At this point, maybe you're investing, maybe buying a new business and running that, however you see it going for you. Maybe this is you sitting on a beach, right? But so it's a fun exercise to think about what you could do when your business is done. So I have various strategies and tools to climb up these steps or to fill in any gaps if you've been in business for a while. But we're really here to talk about marketing and sales, right? So in the chat, let me know, where in the 6 steps does that fit? What step are we really looking at marketing and sales? Come on, any guesses? Yes. Okay, we've got one for niche, one for leverage. Anybody else have an idea? Another one for leverage. Close, close. Leverage is really about those systems, right? So leverage is kind of taking what you've got and making it run kind of more automatically. So if you're talking about automating your sales or your marketing or your customer onboarding process, that would certainly fit in at that leverage step. But actually developing a system that works, okay, from lead generation, conversion, repeat and referral business, all of that would fit within that niche step. Okay, niche is all about improving your profits and your cash flow. So that's where these processes are kind of first developed. And if your prospects right now are kind of calling you up and their only question is, okay, how much do you charge? Right? They're already price sensitive. Your sales process is that little bit harder. Okay, but if they've already seen something from you or heard something about you and they already know what makes you different or what the specific benefits are of working with you, now your sales process is of course much easier. So at this level, we start to use your marketing tools to set you up for success right from that very first conversation. And don't get me wrong, I get it. It's really easy to assume that what your prospects are after most of all is a low price. But if you have kind of developed a strong niche for yourself, if your product or your service is somehow differentiated from all of your competitors, then you can have a different conversation. So this is kind of one place where your marketing can do a lot of the heavy lifting to make people excited to work with you because of what you can do for them. And it's not to say that price isn't going to be a factor or that it shouldn't be a factor. Of course, people have budgets, businesses have budgets, and everybody likes to get a good deal. So, of course, if all else is equal, if there's no other noteworthy difference, then why wouldn't your customers buy on price, go for the lowest price? But that's the trick. Okay, we don't want all else to be equal. We want to kind of tip the scales, and that starts with how you approach your prospects. So your marketing has 2 roles. The first is communication. Okay? You need to let people know that you exist and what you do. But the second is education. Okay? To educate potential customers on the value of what you offer them. Because study after study has shown that people don't buy on price alone. Okay, so maybe there are certain commodities that are kind of the same everywhere you get them. Maybe gas for your car could be an example of that, where the price is pretty much the only factor that you care about. But for the most part, with most of our purchases, we care a lot more about getting good value for our money, getting a sweet deal. And to get value, we're actually often willing to pay more. So I can give you an example of this. This is, just in my own life. I had to get new tires for my car a little while ago. And for me, tires was one of those like commodity type purchases where I just wanted something that wasn't going to fall off my car, right? I'm not looking for high performance because I don't really know the difference between one brand and the next or one tread pattern and the next. I'm kind of assuming that if they're on the market, they've passed some safety tests and the cheapest is going to get me around where I need to go, right? And I'm sure that somebody on the call is laughing right now because they know a lot more about this than me. But there you go, right? I was an uneducated customer. So I called the dealership and I asked them how much for a new set of tires. And they told me. Okay. I called somewhere else to get a comparison and I asked how much for a new set of tires. And they told me. Okay, so I called around to a third place because I'm really shopping for a low price here. and I asked how much it would be for a new set of tires. And the person who answered the phone asked a killer sales question. She said, "Sure, I can help you with that. But first, is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions to make sure I'm giving you the best information?" Now, what's anyone going to say to that? Sure, of course. So she asked me a couple of questions about my driving habits. She took the time to give me some information about how some tires might last longer, so I didn't have to buy them again for a while. And in like a 5-minute phone call, she gave me 3 or 4 different variables that I could factor into my tire purchase. And now I'm no longer just asking for a low price. So I bet you can guess how this all ends. Of course, I take my car to the third place. Of course, I end up spending more than the quotes I got from either of the first 2 places. And I absolutely didn't regret it, right? Because I felt like I was getting good value for my money. So communication and education are each vital, okay? Whatever you're selling, it's probably not tires, whatever it is, your job is to educate your prospects on the value that you offer. So this is a key question, right? What value other than a low price do you offer your customers? What are the other factors in your industry that could go or do go into somebody's decision to make a purchase? So this key differentiator, right? The key value that you offer can become your unique selling proposition or your USP. This is the core message that you absolutely want to communicate to your prospects and your customers. One particular benefit or service that only you provide or that you do better than anyone else out there. And if you can stand out like that, if you can kind of establish your own uniqueness in the market, then it's not going to matter whether you're the cheapest, because the people who want that thing know that they can only get it from you. So I find that a lot of people I talk to, and I'd have to say especially professional service providers, have some trouble figuring out what sets them apart. Like what makes one accountant different from another, right? It's not like there's a lot of scope for creativity in that profession. That's okay, because the uniqueness doesn't actually have to be in the product or the service that you offer. It can also be something to do with your particular profile or something about the experience of doing business with you. And again, if you don't have this point of difference, then what are you giving customers to help them choose to do business with you rather than your competition? You're really back to basics. You're probably just going to come back to price. So I'm going to talk about some great examples in a minute. But first, I just want to squash some really common examples, because when I start talking about USP, inevitably somebody says, well, my USP is the great customer service that I provide. Okay, I'm not saying you don't provide great customer service. Actually, I'm sure that you probably do. The problem is that everyone says that they do. And if everyone is saying it, then how unique is it? And is it believable when all your competitors are saying the same thing? So customer service is actually a really difficult one to market. Another one I get a lot has to do with experience. Well, I have 30 years of experience doing this type of work. Great, okay. That might be really meaningful to a very particular type of customer. But for most people, it's probably not going to be a critical factor, right? If you have 30 years of experience and the next person they talk to has 12, you'd each probably have enough experience to handle whatever it was they needed to get done. So it might not be as compelling as you think from the customer's perspective, although of course it's really meaningful for you. So a successful USP is one that is truly unique, not something that they've heard a ton of times already. So if you're using words like cheapest, customer service, speedy, best, it kind of becomes part of this jumble of like fluff words and hyperbole that we all are bombarded with every day. We don't want it to be generic or vague, and we don't need to please everyone all the time because that's a losing battle. So we can really focus your sites and get very specific. It has to be exciting. I call this the what the factor, that makes people do a double take, something that cuts through the noise and makes people take notice. So one Action Coach client was an air conditioning repair company in Nevada. can imagine air conditioning, probably a pretty hot topic in Nevada. So this was a mid-sized company and they were doing all right. They were doing pretty well. But after talking with their coach, they decided that fast service was going to be the premise for their USP. Now, I know you're thinking fast service is not particularly creative, and you're right. Okay, lots of companies were already saying that they had fast service. So they took it a step further. Okay, they said, because we have 58 technicians on call, 24 hours a day, we can guarantee that your home or business will be cool within 2 hours of your call, or there's no charge for the repair. Now that is specific and that is unique. No one else had that offer. And of course, they couldn't actually get there and fix every call within 2 hours, right? Sometimes they needed to order in the parts or whatever. So what they did is they invested in a bunch of portable units, which they would set up at no cost to the customer right away when they arrived. And this worked, okay? Because the number of calls they got quadrupled in a month. Because the offer they made was exciting and it was compelling enough and it was different enough and it really stood out. So your USP is this like singular, unique benefit that your customers can expect to receive when they choose you, stated in like really specific, really graphically illustrated terms. And it can make you the obvious choice. So they're thinking, well, I'd have to be an idiot not to do business with anyone else, regardless of price. So if it's exciting, it will get people talking. So another great example of this is a plumber, okay, who had a small company. This is in the Midwest, in the American Midwest. And his company was doing great to the point where the local Chamber of Commerce was giving him an award. So they had this big gala evening planned, pre-pandemic, right, obviously. And his wife bought a new dress and he had a nice tux. And it was a Friday night and they were all dressed up. They were heading out for the gala when his phone rings with a service call. Now, his company was doing well, but he still had the evening on call. And his wife was giving him that look like, don't you dare answer that, right? Some of you may be familiar with that look. But he answered it. And it was this older woman, and she had some problem with her sink. So off he went in his tux, toolbox in one hand, and he fixed the issue in a few minutes and gave her a bill, and off they went to the gala. Well, the next day his phone rings again, and it's another older woman. Are you the plumber in a tux? She asks. Because her friend had told her all about this new plumber who did house calls in a tux. So he laughs a bit, right? And off he goes. And the next day his phone rings again, and it doesn't stop, right? And it's not a joke anymore. Now he buys tuxes for his team, and he prints new business cards with a picture of a tux on it, and they become the plumbers in tuxes. And the customers love it, and the business is off to the races. So here's the point, okay? In a trade where the customers know that any plumber they call can probably fix the tap. So what are they shopping for? You might think price, but what else? So not only someone who can do the job for cheap, but somebody professional, someone they trust to let into their home, someone tidy, someone with pants that fit so they don't see more of the plumber than they want to. And of course, a plumber in a tux is going to deliver all of that. So I'm not recommending that you need to go out and find some really gimmicky thing, but it's worth thinking, is there something noteworthy that you can use as a kind of shorthand to communicate that you know what the customer wants and you can deliver it well? Now, if you're the first to offer something specific, it's really hard for others to copy you. So this is kind of getting back to that piece where if your product or service is more or less similar to others in your marketplace, in your industry, there might be something about the process of doing business with you. So there was a bike shop that decided to position themselves as a children's bike specialist. The staff were all trained in how to properly measure and fit gear for kids. So in that case, this literally was something that any other bike shop could easily do and probably did do on a regular basis if someone asked for it. The only innovation was that this particular shop decided to advertise it. We are the children's bike gear specialist, right? And now they have the advantage because, if anyone else says, hey, we do that too, well, it looks like they're just copying the first store. And of course, everyone's going to want the original, not the copycat. So the rule of being first tells us that being the first to position yourself in a certain way gives you the advantage, even if it's something that others are actually doing but are not yet promoting. So let's quickly jump back in the chat. Does anybody have a USP for their business that they can share? Or does anybody have an idea for one? And it's fine if you don't, but if there's somebody who's already thinking about this, it would be great to share it with the group. I'm not seeing anything coming in, so it's open. If you've got one, if you're writing right now, keep writing, and I'll shout it out when I see it, but I'll keep going for now. So if the process, and so this process, right, of defining and positioning your unique selling proposition, this really becomes the keystone for your other marketing efforts, right? It's really step one. So if you haven't done this yet, I see someone in the chat saying that I wish I did, I need to think about it. Don't worry, start here, okay? Invest the time to come up with a uniqueness that really matters and build the rest of your marketing around it, because that way it becomes a part of your culture. It's kind of baked into the business and it becomes what you're known for. And because it is so central to what you do, it really does have to be carefully chosen. You can't say, for example, well, I am the only IT professional in my neighborhood who works in a red brick building. But of course, well, that is unique. No one cares, right? So it has to be meaningful. So I'm going to give you some actions to take away if you're in the process of creating your USP. Okay. One thing you can do first is assess any fears or concerns or frustrations that people often have when dealing with your industry. So in that plumbing example, it might have been that people hate waiting around for someone to show up late, and they hate tidying up after them. So the tux was kind of a symbol for the real difference, which was a promise to be professional and clean. Okay, so the next thing you can do is you can pick a few competitors, maybe 3 competitors, and figure out what they do exactly, what they do well and what they do poorly. And then you can kind of score your business against them. And often you will find something that makes you different. So you can rate yourself and them out of a 10, say on service, on product, on knowledge, on experience, on location. If there truly isn't anything there, then we can create a point of difference, but it makes sense to start with what's already there. And something like 90% of us don't actually check out our competitors regularly. Another thing you can do is you can survey your customers about why did they choose you. The answers may surprise you, and there may be something there that already is setting you apart that you hadn't considered. And as you go about articulating your key difference, some jumping off points that you could use could be something like a higher quality, your specialized subject matter knowledge, some sort of customization of the solution, the speed that you can deliver, or maybe something that most people charge for in your industry and you do for free. So then once you kind of have that thing, you can really lean into it and make a kind of a more specific statement around it, and assess whether your marketing material already makes the value clear to your prospect, or whether there's some tweaks you can make to make it really clear. I'm seeing in the chat, Christina says, when clients sign up for maintenance of their plants with me, I will replace anything that dies or isn't thriving. So that's great. So that's kind of a specific promise, and it speaks to the kind of the quality and the care of the service. So I like that. That's great. And that kind of brings up the next point really naturally. So thank you, Christina, for that, because creating a difference can also be done with a guarantee. Okay, and this could be that sort of attention grabbing promise, right? You know, in Christina's example, that if anything, any plant doesn't thrive, it gets replaced. The air conditioning company example that guaranteed cool air in 2 hours. If you can grab their attention with a guarantee, then that helps you That's a great step. Another great example of this is another Action Code client in Australia. Okay, this was a professional photographer who specialized in wedding photos. And I really love this example because it's someone who really understood who they were selling to. And they figured out how to de-risk wedding photos because they offered a guarantee that it's not going to rain on your wedding day. Okay, I guarantee it will not rain on your wedding day. And if it does, then they will restage and reshoot the wedding for free. Okay, now of course they can't actually control the weather, but they did the math and they figured out that since they lived in a climate that doesn't have too many rainy days, the actual cost to them to restage and reshoot rainy day weddings was fairly low. And because this guarantee was so appealing to their customers, now they could charge a premium for their service. And that more than offset the costs that they incurred by honoring the guarantee. Another example was a residential construction company that guaranteed that living at home during a renovation wouldn't be stressful, or they would pay for your accommodation elsewhere. Then they went and they built all of their business processes against this no stress guarantee because they knew that was what their customers wanted. So they, did a bunch of work behind the scenes and had a bunch of checklists and processes and systems to ensure that the process of the renovation was as stress-free as possible for the client. And you'd better believe they weren't the cheapest, okay, but price wasn't the deciding factor anymore. And of course, for this to work, you need to tell them not just once, but over and over and over again. So a great promise or a great guarantee goes on your website, it goes on your letterhead, your quote or your proposal, your signage, your business card, your voicemail message, everywhere. Because this can really bridge the gap between the target customer not knowing who you are and, well, let's hop on a quick call, right? Because it can make them curious and it can have them kind of asking, how do you do that? So I've mentioned your target audience or your target customer a couple of times already. And I want to talk about why that is so important. Because if you want a seamless sales process, then we need to get that great USP or guarantee in front of the right person at the right time. So in terms of your marketing materials, the importance of getting in front of the right audience is like 10 out of 10. Okay, this is the most critical and most important thing because you can have the most compelling and the most exciting message, but if you've got the wrong audience, they won't care. So that's why the offer only rates 5 out of 10 for importance. And finally, the copy, the actual text that they see is 1/10 as important as getting in front of the right audience. And time after time, I see people start at the bottom and spend a ton of energy wordsmithing their offer or paying a copywriter. And no disrespect to copywriters because they're great, but that can't be your first step. So how clear is your target audience? Okay? Who experiences the problem that you're trying to solve? How specific can you get? You can think about their demographics, lifestyle, location, how much they earn. Anything you can put in your mind will help you match the benefit you're providing to the needs or the issues that these customers really care about. Because you can figure out what they value, you can figure out how they make their purchase decisions. Another way to think about this is from what we know about Febreze, the odor spray back in the early days of Febreze. So when it was created in the lab, the marketing team at Procter & Gamble thought they knew who their target customer was. The product eliminated odors, right? So the logical customer was someone with a smelly house. So they targeted pet owners and smokers. And guess what? It flopped. No one was buying it because people who lived in those smelly houses didn't actually notice the smell. It didn't bother them. It was not a problem they were trying to solve. So Febreze was repositioned as part of like a daily cleaning routine and marketed to people who were already spending more time and energy house cleaning. And they added more scent too, so that your clean home now smelled as good as it looked. So at that point, it started selling because they understood who they were trying to reach and the actual problem they were trying to solve. And you might notice that all of us need to clean our houses. But the more granular and specific they were able to get in the target market, the more clearly they could articulate the value of the product, because they could really tune in to the worries and the concerns of a particular type of target housekeeper. So once you understand who exactly it is that you're targeting, now your unique selling proposition is a way for you to tailor your messaging so it reaches them really precisely and sets you apart from everyone else who's trying to sell to somebody who's maybe kind of like them, but not them exactly. So let's also talk about what you're offering them, because a lot of business owners default to discounting. This, I think, is because they assume that people are shopping on price alone. And so if that were the case, a special sale or a discount would be a good way to grab their attention. But a lot of people start offering discounts, even, 20 or 25% off, without doing the math. And if you are discounting, you're cutting into your own profit margin. You are giving away your profit. And if you are building a business, it's that profit that can fuel your growth. So you certainly don't want to give it away. And let's say, as an example, your gross margin is 20%, and you discount your prices by 10%. You've just given away half your profit margin. And this is straightforward math, right? So if it costs you $80 to make or buy or pay a salary to deliver what you're selling, and you sell that for $100, your profit is the $20. But if you discount your $100 item by 10%, that's $10 off. That's half your profit margin. And a 10% discount, it sounds like a nothing discount, but it's half. So in order for that discount to be a net win for that business, they would have to do an additional 50% of business just to get back to where they started from. So in your business, does a 10% discount often result in 50% more business? And keep in mind that even if it does, if you're getting 50% more business, then you need to do way more work just to get back to where you were. So is there ever a situation where you want to offer a discount? Like, maybe. Okay, the coaching here, the thing is don't give away your profit for nothing. Don't give a discount just because somebody asks for one, or because you feel like that's how you grab attention. You have to be getting something out of it. I offer a discount for clients who pay me for several months of coaching in advance. In that situation, there's a benefit to me because I can put the money to work today and not have to wait 6 months for it. So there could be a similar equation for you if someone is buying in bulk, or if they're committing to a long-term retainer or something like that. But there really has to be enough benefit for you to make it worthwhile. And there's another way to capture attention or to craft a really great offer, and that's instead of discounting, to add value, which means basically just giving them something extra for the same price. But because you now get to choose what that extra thing is, you can choose something that has little cost to you. And that makes it a double win because the customer wins. They feel like they get well looked after, they're getting something special, they're getting a great bonus, and you get to stop discounting and stop giving your profit away. So instead of 10% off, maybe the offer is something like buy 10 and get one free. Maybe there's an extra customization or an upgrade or an enhanced service, a goodie bag item, something that they're not necessarily expecting, but they will really appreciate. That sort of thing makes for a really great value added offer. And of course, you can do some math on this to find out what makes sense. As an example, there was a bakery that ran a promotion in a community newsletter where they offered to give everyone who came in carrying the coupon get a free donut on a certain day. Come in on Saturday, get a free donut. Now, these donuts typically sold for a couple of bucks, but they only cost the bakery about 30 cents each to make. So they were a high profit margin item, which is perfect for this. Everyone loves a free donut. So a lot of people came by to redeem the offer. And on average, they spent about $3.50 on other stuff while they were in the store. So the bakery paid 30 cents for a $3.50 purchase. The customers thought they were getting a $2 item for free. And the bakery ended up with more revenue at the end of the day than they ever would have gotten had they offered a sale, right? And they also got a bunch of happy new customers who would keep coming back because they felt like, you know, they'd had this great value. So that's a great example of a win-win. And, you know, I don't want you to give too much away. And I know that, you know, it's an easy thing to do. And I know that most people who start a business haven't had specific sales training and often are not comfortable in a sales situation. Often, you know, we started here at the beginning of the presentation. Often the people I talk to find that the identity of salesperson is not a really comfortable one for them. And I've coached business owners who have some really deeply held beliefs about salespeople. Like they're the slime of the earth, basically, and they're greedy and they're only looking out for themselves. And sure, you know, maybe there are some examples that they can even point to where that was the case, but it's not always true. And sometimes we really have to address those beliefs before a business owner feels comfortable selling. Of course, you're never going to be comfortable in a sales situation if you feel like by closing the sale, you yourself are becoming the scum of the earth. It's not going to happen. So instead, this is how I look at it. Okay. A true salesperson is simply somebody who will professionally help other people buy. And, you know, maybe for those people who are saying that they're really comfortable in a sales situation, maybe this is already how they look at it. They're just professionally helping other people to buy. So they are not an order taker who waits around for someone to ask if they can buy something. They aren't pushy, right? They aren't a product pusher who talks about nothing but the product and doesn't ask anything about the customer. They aren't an overseller who, you know, promises the world just to get the sale, which of course leaves the customer disappointed when they can't deliver. They're just a professional problem solver. And the thing is, it's impossible to solve a problem before you know what it is, which is why your best weapon in sales is just asking the right questions. If you remember back to my experience buying new tires for my car, the person I ended up buying from started the call by asking, "Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions to make sure I'm giving you the best information?" Now, there are a couple of reasons why that particular question works so well. First of all, they're asking for my permission to sell me something, and I'm giving it. And that changes the conversation because now they're not being that product pusher or that order taker, right? Now they're helping me solve my problem, which was that I was buying a product that I didn't understand very well. And secondly, they're really tuning in to my favorite radio station, which is WIIFM. This is what's in it for me, right? Why am I the customer in this conversation? What am I going to get out of it? So that question really makes sure that the conversation is centered around me, my needs, right? And I feel like they care enough to match the product that they're selling to my needs. And too often, you know, inexperienced salespeople talk about how excellent the product or service is, or how experienced and terrific they are at what they do, and all the reasons why they should be their choice. And it's, you know, it's me from the part of the salesperson, which the potential customer, you know, probably doesn't care about at all. They're sitting there going, well, what's in it for me? So if you can tune into that station and make sure that your sales script is communicating directly to them, then you can engage in a more productive conversation. So I'm going to kind of assume today in this presentation that this is like a one-on-one conversation that you're having with someone, maybe on Zoom, maybe on the phone, maybe, you know, in a store if you're open. But this can all also be applied to like an online situation. And we can talk about that a little bit more for anyone in that situation. But let's just for now go ahead as though this is a sales conversation. So here's what that can look like in practice. It's like a funnel. So at the top of the conversation, you're really asking some very big picture questions. So let's say, for example, that you're selling shoes. You're establishing maybe whether they want, runners or high fashion. So the questions would be, well, what are these shoes for? When will you wear them? Okay. Then you can gradually get more detailed and more specific. Okay, the shoes are for exercise. Well, what kind of exercise? Are we inside or outside? Okay, are we talking jogging or golf, right? And I get that this is kind of a ludicrous example, right? But you can see how the questions are getting more and more detailed as we go. When you have asked enough questions and when you have gotten enough information, then you can start talking about a solution. But don't forget to check their temperature as you go, because again, if you're offering a solution that doesn't suit what is already in their mind or that they're not feeling great about, then that sales battle is going back uphill. So a temperature checking question could be something like, so how do you feel about that? Is that what you had in mind? And don't be afraid to play dumb at this stage because, remember, they have all the answers. And assuming that you know what they are thinking can and will backfire. So, if you do a temperature check, so is this the sort of thing you had in mind? And they say no. Well, then you head back up, right, to more general questions. But if you have permission to continue, then you can kind of get more and more detailed until you land on something that they absolutely must have, right, because it meets their every need. And this isn't an interrogation. So if you're going to be asking a lot of questions, you don't want to just like hammer them with question after question. So you can kind of break it up with question softeners like these. Can I just ask, how many times do you golf in a typical month? And then, by the way, how long do you want these shoes to last? Okay, so those kind of question softeners can help it feel like a natural conversation and not an interrogation. So if you're ever stuck for a question, you don't know what to ask them next, I have got a few more of those killer sales questions that you can have up your sleeve. So one great one is, can you tell me more about that? This is a great one to fall back on if you're ever just at a bit of a loss. It just kind of keeps them talking. And, often, as they talk, they kind of start telling you about what their real fear or concern or frustration actually is. So that's why, can you tell me more about that, is a really great question to ask. And always remember, WIIFM, what's in it for me? So we have to make sure that we're paying attention and giving like little bits of positive feedback to keep them talking. So there's a cycle that's kind of helpful where you first ask a question, second, listen to the answer, and third, give a bit of a positive stroke or a little bit of information. Like, yeah, sure, I can help with that. Or, yeah, sure, I've dealt with that issue before. Or, oh, you're right about that. And you know what? I think you're heading in the right direction. And after that, then you ask another question. So it's really question, listen attentively, positive stroke, and then another question. And if they ever don't answer right away, that's your cue to stop talking. Okay, sometimes people just need a little silence. It gives them time to think. It can stretch a little bit. It can feel awkward or uncomfortable even. But if you let it go, they will fill it. And often after having that pause to think, they'll often fill it with some vital piece of information that can change the conversation. This is another really great sales question, especially for B2B sales, anyone selling to a business. Who, other than yourself, will be involved in making this decision? A lot of the time I see small business owners investing their time with a representative of a company who at the end of the day doesn't have the authority to spend the money. So this is a good question to ask near the beginning of that sales process. And then of course you can make sure that you include any decision makers as you proceed with the process. If you're trying to understand the benefit that they're really looking for, okay, what really brought them to you? You can ask this one. how do you want blank to be different by the future? So if you sell marketing, for example, this question would be, how do you want your lead flow to be different 12 months from now? Okay. The answer tells you the benefit that they're really looking for. And you can flip this phrase around if it's more comfortable for you. Maybe it could be something like, so suppose we're having this conversation 12 months from now. Looking back, what would have had to have happened for you to feel really happy with your lead flow? Okay, so either way works. Now, when it comes to budget, obviously finances are going to enter the conversation at some point, and you've got to make sure that they can really afford whatever it is that you want them to buy. Otherwise you're kind of wasting your time. So can I ask, and that's a question softener, by the way, because this, can feel delicate. Can I ask what budget you've set aside for this purchase? This question also lets you know how serious they are. Are they actually ready to make a purchase, or are they more in the information gathering stage? Right? So you can figure out your approach based on what they say. And what I really like as a follow-up to this is, okay, and what factors other than price are important for you to consider when making this decision? There will be other factors. Price is rarely the only consideration. And for any given customer or prospect, it might not be the most important. So it's a great follow-up. What factors other than price are important for you to consider when making this decision? So if you remember the question funnel, at this point, we've asked some really good questions. We've gathered a lot of information about the problem they're trying to solve. We've listened attentively to the answers, right? We've tuned into the customer. We're helping them solve the problem. And when you're confident that you have enough information, now it's time to offer a solution. So that could be something like this. Based on what you've told me, either solution X or Y will suit you best. Or this could be, based on what you've told me, solution X will fit you best. So we've offered a solution, and then what's next? We want to check their temperature, right? How does that fit with what you had in mind? Or which one fits best with what you had in mind? So this is really when you're really close to that decision-making time. And it's not pushy. It's not, quote unquote salesy. It gives them time to think, and it allows them to keep bringing up any areas of concern that you haven't addressed yet before you really go in to close the sale. So assuming that you get a positive response to this, oh yeah, that fits well. Yeah, that I think that'll work. Now all you have to do is close the sale. So at this point, if they've given a positive response here, I think you're safe to assume that they're probably going to buy. And now you can drop a detailed question. So would it be okay if I outlined what we need to do to get that underway? Or another possible question here could be, okay, well, I'd like to get started. So can we set an appointment for next week on Thursday? Is that okay with you? Or, it could be something like, okay, how would your company typically pay for this type of purchase? So what you ask specifically at this point will depend on your product and your industry, but it gives you an idea, right? It's the type of question that leads them to a next step rather than, into more questions and more problem solving. Make sense? And then at that point, the only thing left to do is to close the sale. So this is kind of the final confirmation. So, sometimes this can start with a question. Sometimes it's just like, a check to see if they're actually ready. So that could be, wow, based on everything we've talked about, we'd have to be crazy not to give this a try, right? Or if you're not comfortable with that, if you want like a lower stakes version of that, you could try, okay, so what do you think we should do from here? And that second one really takes the pressure off a bit, right? Especially if you think there might be any objections that you still might need to overcome, or even if they're really eager to get started and you want to let them lead the way. And once they've confirmed that they are going ahead with the purchase, you can move into the next step, right? Which is, Great. Let me explain what's involved in purchasing the solution. So the point is that not that you use all of these questions in the order that I've kind of rattled them off in. They might not all work for you. They might not all make sense for your industry or your business. But the takeaway is that, you know, you can have a sales script that feels natural and that is comfortable for the customer, and that anybody working with you or for you can use the same script and use the same basic questions in the same basic order. And that also allows you to do the kind of testing and measuring that I mentioned at the beginning, right? To test whether this script is working for you. Because if you always change it every time, it's less obvious, you know, whether it's really working or whether there are other factors at play. But if you always use the same script and you know, make little tweaks or changes, you know, every so often, then you can really test and measure the results of that script. So at this point, you know, at the close of the sale or before the close of the sale, they may well tell you why they don't think they can, or they don't think they should go ahead with the purchase. So commonly, those objections will be about either not having enough money or not having enough time. Those are kind of the two really common ones. There might be others in your industry as well. Sometimes the objection is final, right? They just aren't interested. But often they aren't. Often there's a kind of professional problem-solving oriented way to overcome the objection. It's definitely worth having a script for dealing with really common objections so that they don't throw you off when they do come up. So if the objection is that they have no money, they have no budget for this, there may be a way to show them that by employing your product or your service will actually help them make a larger profit, and you know, it's enough to cover the costs, or more than enough to cover the costs. If they have no time, you know, maybe there's a way for you to show that by implementing your solution, it will actually free up some of their time. Okay, so that there's a conversation that's still to be had. So your script for that might look something like this. First of all, agreeing with them, definitely not arguing with them. You're not going to win that one. So if you can agree that, yes, you know what, you're right. Of course, there are financial considerations, and yep, you know, implementing a new product or solution, yeah, it can be time consuming. But here's another great question. Is there any other reason beside that one that would prevent you from making the purchase, right? Like if the budget weren't an issue, in that case, would you want to go ahead? So if they say, no, there's something else, you might uncover a secondary objection. And that often is actually the real one, right? Often the first one is kind of an excuse that they throw up, or, you know, just an easy way out of the conversation. But there's a different objection, which is really the main thing. But if they say, you know, yeah, no, I would go ahead. It's just the budget. That's the issue. You know, well, in that case, you know, can we invest some time to look at that, to see what we can do about it? And once you've then collected the objections, whether there's one or whether there's many, at that point, you can continue with your questioning to, for example, find out what's it costing them now not to have your solution. Or, you know, if they're experiencing the problem that you solve, what does that cost them? And that might reframe the budget decision for them. Now, when you're in a sales role, you ask serious questions, and if you want to have a kind of serious conversation, then you need to become a sales professional. So here are just some quick things to keep in mind if you're, you know, working on adopting this identity as a salesperson. So having a sales kit. That means, you know, any marketing materials that you might need, any information that you might like to show them at different times. Could be something like testimonials, examples of past work. All of those things can go into a sales kit. Dressing well and being on time kind of go without saying. Remember to keep in touch. So, you know, if somebody has an initial conversation with you, you know, you can be fairly proactive and keep in touch with them. Pre-framing a prospect is a useful technique. This basically means making sure that they have some preliminary information before you're in a sales call or conversation with them. So maybe it's providing them some sort of video or demo, or even just, making sure they have access to your Google reviews or your, LinkedIn or your YouTube or, whatever else you've got, and just make sure that they have that information ahead of time. You can do your homework on them, try and get ahead of some of the information they might give you by understanding already kind of who they are and where they're coming from. And of course, keeping testimonials with you. A few more things, using your question funnel to build rapport, making sure you're giving those kind of positive strokes. That can all be part of your script, just to make sure that you are on their team and you're helping them solve their problem. Again, using the questions to figure out what's most important. No point in assuming that you know. Following up and sending thank you cards. So many people don't do that. Don't be afraid to ask for referrals. Even if you don't get the business, but you think you developed a good rapport with them, or they were really interested, but it just didn't work out. Is there anyone else that you know who might be interested in this sort of product or service? It can be a really useful question. And then being consistent, especially if you have a team that's responsible for sales, making sure that everybody is following the same basic script and the same basic process and using the same materials. So I'm going to close in a minute here and open up for questions. So the Q&A is going to be happening in the chat. If there is anything top of mind, please go ahead and start entering it now. But I'm going to close with this quote from Brad Sugars, who is the Action Coach CEO. He really created the business coaching industry back in the early 90s. And he said this, words can inspire, thoughts can provoke, but only action truly brings you closer to your dreams. And I like this quote because action is a really carefully chosen word, right? There's a difference between motion and action. When you are in motion, you are planning, right? You're strategizing, you're learning. You might even feel a sense of motion already if something that I said today triggered a sense of what might be possible for your business or what the next level might be. An action, on the other hand, is a specific behavior that will deliver an outcome. So, for example, thinking of 5 new marketing strategies is motion. Calling someone and asking for their business is action. Okay, the learning and the planning are essential, but the action gets results. And as humans, we kind of have a natural tendency towards motion because it gives us great satisfaction of, feeling like we're making progress, but it doesn't carry any risk of failure, which of course we all hate. So don't be afraid of action and don't let kind of preparation become procrastination. I do want you to, think about what from this you can take away, what you can put into action, what you can implement, and what you can execute. Okay, so at this point, let's talk a little bit about next steps. And I know that some of you came just for information today, and I do hope you got it. I hope this was, good investment of your time. I hope you picked up tips and ideas that you can use right away. And if that's you, that's fantastic. I do these sessions. I love doing them because this is really the easiest and fastest way that I can help people. So if that's you, if you got value from this, I would absolutely love it if you would jump onto LinkedIn and leave me a recommendation there to say that you attended and that you think it might help other business owners too. But if you're sitting there and you're thinking either live or watching the recording, okay, well, I've got some information and now I need to execute, right? You realize it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. I also want to help you with that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to gift you with a free coaching session. Okay, the first one is on me. And we can use that time to get some work done on your business. And so my guarantee is that it will make good use of your time no matter what. And, and in that process, we can also evaluate if it makes sense for us to work together beyond that. But the free session is definitely no obligations and no strings attached. So if that's you, if you'd like to follow up, please do get in touch with me. I'd love to chat more about your business specifically. And my email address is on the slide. So again, whether you're live or watching the recording, please do reach out and I'm happy to hang out here for the next 15 minutes or so and take any questions you have in the chat. But thank you very much for being here and sticking with it. I'm gonna stop sharing, I think, so that we can actually see faces.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation, Caitlin. So we do have a few questions that came in before the webinar.
Okay.
So one of them was, what's some good content in order to promote a product?
Gosh, that's a good question. It would depend. I think it would be part of a longer conversation about, who is the target market for the product and what problem the product is trying to solve. What I can do is I can provide a bit of a questionnaire. So I'll send this to you guys at the city, and maybe you can pass it around to anybody who wants to use it. But it will give you kind of a series of questions around, figuring out who your target market is and what your uniqueness is, your USP, your point of difference. And from there, we can figure out, what materials you would need. But if you remember back, to the kind of the levels of importance in your marketing, the target market is that 10 out of 10 importance. The offer is the 5 out of 10 importance, and the actual copy is like 1 out of 10. So starting with the what materials do I need? It's a good question, but it's not the first question. Does that make sense?
So you've got to figure out your target audience first and a bunch of other factors before you think of content, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think if we, hammer out the kind of the key value proposition, and then the content will flow from there.
Okay, awesome. Another question we got was, I'd love tips on getting people to recognize value when many others in my field offer lower pricing or product-based pricing. For example, I'm a copywriter and I charge project fees, not hourly rates or per word rates.
Great. Well, I'm sorry I bashed copywriters a little bit. I take it back. Um, so I hope you got some pointers through the presentation. I think we did talk a fair amount about kind of how to separate yourself, and it sounds like there is already a point of difference there. And then it would be a question of working that into that USP statement or a guarantee that really sets you apart from the people who operate differently than you do. So to the asker of the question, I hope that you got your answers as part of the session. And if you want to follow up one-on-one, then let's do that.
Awesome. And Caitlin's information will also be provided at the end of the webinar through an email. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have about 10 to 13 minutes or so. But one other question that we got was, how do I get more traffic direct to their website? And then they said, and as well as their LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter.
Sure. There are different ways to do it, depending on what you sell, and kind of whether it's a high budget item or a low budget item. Typically, if you're selling something that costs, say, over $200, it becomes more difficult to kind of sell it through the website, because it often requires that kind of another touch point. But if we're driving traffic to a website and to social media, one thing is to be really active on those channels. So if you're trying to drive traffic through Facebook, for example, or through LinkedIn, being active in a couple of the community groups can really help. Posting great content that has great value, acting, kind of positioning yourself as that problem solver often has people seeking you out rather than, in a lot of these channels, we see this real barrage of, visit me, visit me, visit me. But if you can show the audience that what's in it for me part, that certainly helps. And providing great content, right? But content marketing is very much a real thing and a real winner. And can really underpin everything else that you do, right? If you're providing great content and then you're sharing that content out through your social media, then it all becomes part of this kind of cohesive whole rather than this kind of disjointed visit me, visit me, visit me kind of campaign.
So would you put like a cap or a number of times that you would sort of be producing that content throughout the week, or is it all about consistency?
Consistency. It's all about consistency. Again, it depends on the audience and what their appetite is for what you're doing. Certainly test and measure. I have a lot of people who come and say, okay, I have a new idea for a marketing campaign, whether it's content marketing or whether it's, starting to do some Facebook ads or leaning into SEO or whatever it is, okay, I have this idea, is it going to work? And I usually say, okay, well, let me go get my crystal ball. Like, I don't know. I don't know your target audience that well. So I always recommend, testing and measuring. So what is the smallest sample size that will give you the information you need? Okay, so if you're talking about doing a Facebook ad campaign, how much do you actually need to spend just to gauge whether or not it will be successful? If it's a direct mail campaign and you want to send out postcards, we don't start sending out 5,000. We might start by sending out 50, or 100 or whatever it is that you need. And, trying a bunch of different things and then really measuring the results. One way you can measure results is by offering different promo codes in different places. So let's say you try a few things in tandem. You have a LinkedIn campaign, you have a Facebook campaign, an Instagram campaign, and a direct mail campaign, for example. And each one has a slightly different promo code that will allow you to track, who's actually coming in from what source or what offer they saw that kind of stuck with them. I had one action coach client who was spending $5,000 a month on advertising. And we did the strategy, right, where we started putting promo codes in place and quickly learned that actually the ad she was spending $1,000 a month on was really bringing in the lion's share of the traffic. So armed with that information, she quit spending in all of the other places and put the entire budget into the thing that was working. And then the business started to grow. And then you can kind of grow from there and find, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. So diversify and find a few other things that work. But you really need the data, right? You need the data first.
Okay, awesome. And then one more question we have is, what is the best way to know your target audience? So they're saying that they're a new startup, they're launching their product in September to October, and the only target audience research that they've come across is online.
Okay, can you clarify whether it's kind of the best way to know who your target audience is in kind of general terms, or whether this is kind of like getting to know the needs and wants and frustrations of the target audience? I think that was Aretha. Could you clarify?
Yeah. I think what they're trying to say is how should they go about finding their target audience. So right now they're looking at online research, but are there any other avenues or ways to figure out their target audience?
Okay, so the target audience is creative people. So you know who the target audience is, and the question is really how to reach them, if I'm understanding that correctly. I always think of a business exists to solve a problem. That's at its core, that's what a business does. So the target audience will be the people who experience the problem that you solve. So if it's a product that helps people do something more efficiently or better to a higher standard, or whatever it is, you can kind of take that solution, that key benefit, and figure out who experiences the problem the most. And typically we try and get away from a really big group of everyone who's ever owned a camera, for example, which is basically everyone. And we try to really reduce it down as much as possible, because that allows us to really aim the marketing really carefully, right? The USP, it's like, it's like a laser beam that aims a missile. You gotta hone in on that laser, and then once you fire, you might acquire a broader audience as well. But the initial marketing conversation, the initial USP is like that laser beam. Does that make sense? So how do you narrow down your target audience? How do you find your target audience? who experiences the problem and where are they now? You know, where do they go when they're searching for an answer to the problem? Who do they talk to? You know, what other products do they use? You can think about who else is already selling to that same target audience and look at, you know, how they approach them. You could even look at partnering with some of those others. So, you know, who else is selling to creative people? Maybe there's a software, maybe there's a forum, maybe there's a website that you can kind of work in tandem with, but kind of figuring out where they are already and placing yourself there is a great start. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Right, great. And you know, you can think about it like, um, you know, IKEA is a great example, right? Because IKEA appeals to a very specific section of the market who is willing to go and like put themselves through a maze, and they're willing to like argue with their partner as they put a bookshelf together, right? They're not appealing to everybody, and they know that, right? They don't try to. If you're, you know, have a bigger budget, or if you aren't going to DIY build your furniture, you're not going to go to IKEA, and that's fine. So the marketing is all targeted and directed at the people who they know are likely to kind of go through the less positive customer experience. It's almost like the anti-brand, right? If your branding makes you strong, it's kind of like this anti-brand where IKEA is saying, you know, if you want something really great, we don't need you. But they talk directly to that kind of core segment that they're after. Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm coming back next week. So for anybody who would like to come back and then talk about this from another angle and in a little more depth, I hope you can join us next week as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.